We are on the air everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. This is WeatherBrains episode number 551, the pre-show, only for you, bold and daring citizens that dare watch the YouTube feed. This is not on the produced audio version. And this is where we say, we share
outlandish boring things.
Yeah, boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and outlandish, outrageous things from time to time. So yeah, Brian and I took a road trip today. We did not get arrested, no speeding tickets.
We didn't even get in any traffic jams.
No, we avoided that. It was
excellent navigation on the part of the navigator.
Yeah, it was a good, very successful mission. Met some new friends.
Some new enemies?
Yeah, I'm about to say, I'm sure I made a few people mad, but that's just my life.
Maybe we should shout out to them in case they're watching tonight.
Yeah, we'll do that when the show starts. We're over in Starkville, Mississippi, at Mississippi State University for the annual summer workshop, and this is for their distance learning students. At the completion of the 3 years, I think it's 3 years, they have to come to Starkville, come to the Mama Ship, and go through a multiple-day seminar. And every year it's in August, and I have been speaking at this function for many a year. And Brian was kind enough to drive today. So it was great. I've decided, in fact, you know, when we got in there, I've got an AV guy to set everything up. So I need a driver and an AV guy everywhere I go.
And I discovered I will drive Mr. Span anywhere for Little Dewey's barbecue.
Oh boy. And Brian has a little fan.
Yes.
So I Bill, I pulled the standard line, and people were very nice. They were coming up to me, and you had people in there from just all over, from Canada, Los Angeles, I mean, all over. And a young lady came up to me, we started talking, and she listens to the show, and I said, all right, so do you think that Brian Peters looks like Colonel Sanders or Santa Claus? And she said, he doesn't look like either one of those people. She looked at me like I was crazy, and I could read in her eyes, she's thinking, he's an attractive man. He's a good-looking man. So Brian is a fan there. And lately everybody says, Santa Claus, the Colonel Sanders is just going off the table. I don't know what happened.
I don't know either. Well, have you seen the new one on TV? I mean, I know you don't watch TV, so you probably haven't seen him.
No, the new Colonel Sanders.
My wife doesn't like him. I don't think I just don't think he does the original Colonel Sanders any justice.
Hey, Bill, have you got any audio here? We don't hear a word. Usually Bill chimes in here, but I mean, there is not a peep coming from his audio channel.
How about now?
Yep.
You missed all those funny things I said. Doggone it. Brian was talking all over me, so I knew something was wrong.
So is Tony Rice our guest tonight?
He is, but he may be mad. The NWA made him mad, I think.
Well, what did you do to him?
Well, he's a speaker, and so he went to register for the conference, and he didn't want to register for the whole 5 days. He wanted to just so he thought he would get like a free registration for that one day, but no, it doesn't work that way. So
great.
Anyway, I haven't heard from him since that exchange.
Oh, brother, that's great.
So we may be interviewing Rick Smith tonight.
Yeah, we talked about Rick in Starkville, Mississippi today.
Yes, Rick, were your ears burning? We talked about you.
They were burning, but I thought it was the sun shining in the side of the window while I was driving. What's going on in Starkville today?
We were talking about TV markets and severe weather coverage in Oklahoma City and Birmingham, and just your name came up.
And the lovely and talented relationships between all of the Mets in Oklahoma City became a topic of discussion.
And how envious everybody else is.
And how it drives you wild and makes you pull your hair.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, we,
trying
we,
to
we,
keep it.
we think that's a toupee or a weave, one of the two.
No comment.
And I see the problem is Rick can't talk about it, and I don't want to talk about it. But what we need to do, we need to have an Oklahoma City show one night, and we invite all the chief meteorologists, Rick, of course, who's always on the show, and let's just see who shows. In the object of the game, it is not to start a feud. It is not to point fingers. It is not to say who's number one. It is not to say anything, but let's just open up a dialogue and see if we can kind of get on the same page here. So, and Rick will have, he has to, recuse himself from that discussion, but maybe we can just start something here. Who knows? But I would love to do. I would love to have Bill Murray. You're our guest booking guy. An Oklahoma City show where we invite Mike Morgan, David Payne, Damon Lane, and Brian. Who's the guy from the Sinclair station? They're not very.
Jeff George.
George.
Just Jeff George. That's it.
We'll invite all of those gentlemen and kind of leave it at that, and just. Again, we make it perfectly clear this is no confrontation. We're just going to have a love fest. We are going to have a bonding, healing. We're going to sing Kumbaya. We're going to hold hands.
As an alternative, can I get the WWE announcer and let's just do it that way?
Yeah, or we could have a total mud wrestling situation where,
We'll start out with the first one, and then we'll be prepared to go.
Yeah.
WWE.
The system will evolve upscale.
Yeah.
We'll take bets on exactly how long it goes from a love fest to a mud fest.
There you go. No, I'm all for that.
In fact, somebody has suggested this, is that we ought to take one market and just do a show on that one market, on television market, TV weather. And not, obviously not every week, because we don't want to chase off our friends in the world of academia and, everything else, but just every once in a while, take a market and ask the chief meteorologist to come on the show all at the same time. We could do my market. It's great. I would love to have my friends from the other channels here. And again, it's not to spark a feud, but just to talk about what we do in the market and how we, call to action and colors, and how do we coordinate the important stuff during life-threatening weather. Is there any coordination at all? How do you do that? So
there'd be a lot of interest in that, and get people to send in their questions in advance, or that would be a popular show for sure.
Yeah, and I think we picked some really active markets, and not necessarily just tornado markets like ours, but pick some winter storm markets like Boston. That came up multiple times today. When I spoke, was how they struggle with the same issue in Boston with nor'easters. The kind of staying on the same page, where it's just gotten out of hand. We should have a Weather Channel show one night where they come on, So I don't know, but and I think we probably should put in the show notes, Brian, that the Dave Schwartz link. That was looking back at that was a really special show we had with him. Now that was before we did video, but we'll be sure and mention that in the show here, since that happened after the last one we did. So do I need to invite Tony Rice?
Yeah, I invited him, James, but he might be looking
you made
for
him mad.
I know, I'm desperate over here.
I got to meet.
I didn't actually make him mad, but I was a bystander to the drive-by shooting.
You let it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bill's running some scam. He's trying to charge Tony, $500 for one day for him to come speak. I mean,
Got to make money.
All right, so I've invited him, and if he's not on the show, we're going to interview Rick. And he just
There's Tony. I see him.
Whew, thank goodness.
Maybe he was in the Atlanta airport today.
I saw some people have been sending me some of these pictures in the Atlanta airport, and it is just nasty, nasty, bad. I don't even want to think about how bad it is over there. Concourse B. It is an ocean of humanity. I mean, as far as you can see, it's like, oh, people have been up and they're cranky and they smell funky and they're in your space. You know, it's just, man. Tony, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. So Bill has got you upset and agitated, and we apologize for him.
This is not true. I am not at all upset.
It was not me.
Oh, Bill's trying to charge you $1,000 to come into the show where you're speaking. I mean, come on.
I work for peanuts. That's not happening. Let me grab some headphones real quick.
He's got a, what do you call those things? It's a Yeti? It's a nice, one of those blue microphones there. All right, so we are about to go. Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, good evening, good evening to our television fans. They've got this thing down to a science here on the television side. Right at 30 minutes after the hour, they hit us coming out of the break. They do breaks over there. So welcome to those watching on the television side. This is WeatherBrains. We are about to start show number 551. I feel a good show coming on here. So Kevin is out. Is that the deal?
I do not know. I haven't seen anything.
Who made Kevin mad?
Remember, he had a death in the family.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That is true. Kevin's mom passed away, and this was about a week ago.
Yes.
So he might be out. Now, Nate has no excuses, Tony. Tony, you're in charge of Nate. What would we do to make him mad?
I can't keep up with him.
Yeah.
Somehow that sounds like a commentary.
He's off creating ice sculptures for that news station of his.
What?
He's off flying
sculptures?
somewhere.
Ice sculptures. Yeah, they did it again. They did an entire news desk out of ice. I think it was this time last year, but this time they did a Olympic-themed one. I think it lasted all of an evening.
Wow.
Yes, it's August. It does not last long in this heat.
No.
This does pass for entertainment in Raleigh, though.
In other words, you guys are hard up for entertainment, huh?
Something like that.
So, got a note here. Hello, Mr. Span. My name is Patrick. We're doing a series on our YouTube channel called Weather Geek Wednesday. I thought the Weather Channel had Weather Geeks is their name. We are looking for national meteorologists to be a guest star. Would you be interested? I've done more weather podcasts in the last 3 months, and goodness, I'm not this one, but new ones that are popping up. And again,
there's a lot of new ones.
Yes, great. It's great. Look, the more the merrier. Bring it on. All right, so let's get this thing rolling here since
We're
we are
still the first.
Yeah, we're the originals.
Does it pay better than WeatherBrains?
It pays triple. They pay triple over there. 0 times 3. All right, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains, the weekly show that's all about weather. WeatherBrains episode number 551. This is for Monday, August 8th, 2016. We're starting to see a sign of the change here. I know we're still in the dog days of summer, but we're seeing kids going back to school, and football is back on television. And I love fall. I'm a big fall weather fan, so we can see the end at the light of the tunnel after a long, hot summer. Got a few of our regulars that are out this evening. Aubrey is out, and Kevin is out. Nate, we hope to have here with us in just a little bit, but Brian Peters is the internationally beloved meteorologist, and Brian, we took a road trip together today.
Promise me barbecue, I'll drive you anywhere.
There you go, man. So Brian and I hopped into a company vehicle and drove to Mississippi State University.
Starkville, Mississippi.
Starkville, the Golden Triangle. And every year they have a summer workshop for their distance learning students, the distance students. And you have to come to the workshop. I believe it's 3 days. And I kicked it off today and almost shut that thing down, Brian. It got a little raunchy in there, but
yeah,
a little raucous. But we had a great time, met a lot of new friends, a lot of listeners to the show. So for those that told me that you listen, you sounded so sincere, I actually believe that you do listen. So we had a great time today, and we had people there all the way from Los Angeles to Toronto and Allentown, and all points in between. We had one from Oklahoma City, Rick. It was a very good session, and the barbecue was really good. And we had no speeding tickets. We didn't get thrown in jail, and we made it back on time. So, Brian, it was good.
That makes for a successful trip.
It was.
And we promised we would shout out to the group just in case they're listening over there tonight, because I don't know what their entertainment was for the night. It might be they put WeatherBrains on their entertainment.
Yeah, well, they're going to put WeatherBrains on the big screen at the football stadium over there at Scott Field. They got one of these massive TVs.
I only saw it from the back, but that was big.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it is massive, and they're going to put us on the screen in the football stadium, and the guests are going to be on the in the end zone there watching. So shout out to Starkville. Good to have Rick Smith on tonight. Rick, we talked about you today in a good way.
Well, it's good to be talked about in a good way. I haven't, since I've been to Starkville and worked at the Memphis office, we would technically in our CWA, but they were really close. So that's got a good group of folks down there. I spent today in beautiful Stillwater, Oklahoma, talking to the manager there and getting ready for football season at OSU. So it's a productive day.
So, Rick, are you an Oklahoma State fan or an Oklahoma fan?
On the clock. I love all colleges, universities, technical centers, K-12. But we're in. Well, I've got blue on, but it should be crimson and cream here.
So you're an OU guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I love everything and everybody. If I walked around with Bill Murray like some Alabama homeboy, I'd be assassinated on the streets out here. I mean, half the state won't read Bill's blog post because he's an Alabama boy. They call him Bammers. Around here, you're a Bammer or a Barner.
Yeah.
Alabama is a Bammer and Auburn is a Barner, and he's a Bammer. So half the state won't read his stuff because he flaunts the Bammer stuff. So I don't know.
Only on this show.
I love everything and everybody. So, goodness, I guess it's just us guys. So, Bill, Mr. Bammer, bring in our guest.
Show title.
Yeah, Mr. Bammer is our show title for this week.
Yeah, James, tonight the guest WeatherBrain needs no introduction. Of course, he's a regular.
Wait, I'm sorry, Bill. Do we need to bring in Morgan?
No, he's retired from his monthly duties.
What? He's done?
Officially, yeah, he was finished.
Wow.
Said thank you for the opportunity. So we'll have to get another monthly panelist.
Wow.
So
I'm sorry.
No.
It just dawned on me that I didn't invite our guest panelist, but since we don't have one, we'll get them next time we have one.
But Tony Rice, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
You know, this Juno thing is really exciting, Tony. This has been a lot of fun to watch this happen. I can't imagine being in mission control and knowing that this thing costs, I don't know, several $1 billion. I guess I don't know what it costs. Maybe you do, but what if it goes wrong?
Well, this is an interesting one, and I try to avoid those cost questions because they lead to heartache, and I'll leave that to the accountants. That's
no more than an F-16 fighter or something, I'm sure.
Oh, certainly not. But this one was particularly interesting because there have been some missions that have failed to go into orbit around their objectives, and there was a Venus probe recently that had that particular problem, and they were able to recover it, oddly enough, through a lot of really good engineering and really smart people. And that one was particularly crippled too, so they went into some really weird science orbits. Were able to achieve most of their objectives, but I don't even think that was possible with Juno because Juno was arriving at such a very high velocity, and it had to just simply make it there, that had something gone wrong during that orbit insertion, that mission was probably lost. And that's what was so incredible about this mission was, again, it was arriving at such a very high velocity that they had to turn it around and fire that engine, very long burn, several 20, 30-minute long burn, which is unheard of when you're going into orbit around a planet like that. That it's amazing. It worked perfectly, and they slid into just that perfect orbit. So they did a marvelous job there.
Well, I know there was a lot of relief in mission control when that happened, but tell us a little more about the mission, start to finish. It's been up 5 years now, is that right, Tony?
Excuse me. Yeah, I was actually at the launch this time 5 years ago, and what was interesting about this particular mission is a fairly large spacecraft. It has a lot of solar panels on it. We can talk about that a bit. That's one of the really unique things about this mission is the solar panels. It required a pretty large rocket, a pretty large lifting rocket, the Atlas V. It really jumped off the pad because there was a lot of power there. But even that wasn't enough. So the path that it took out to Jupiter took it past Earth again. So it looped out there pretty widely, excuse me, and came back for a kind of a glancing blow past Earth to use our gravity well as a gravity assist to give it a little more velocity. And the cool thing that happened there was it passed pretty much directly over South Africa and had a little bit of other possibility of people seeing it, and there are some folks with even backyard telescopes that were able to see it as it passed by. But one of the really cool things that happened was that amateur radio operators were encouraged to try and contact Juno, and they sent simply Morse code of hi, HI. And it was captured. It was caught. We recorded it, and it was played back as it passed by Earth. So there was thousands of amateur radio operators that were trying this. There's a number of them that actually made it through to the spacecraft.
So Tony, this wasn't the first mission to Jupiter. Talk about the other missions and how the scientists have built on those other missions in designing the objectives for this one.
Well, we've actually had quite a few spacecraft pass by Jupiter, so there's been a lot of images that have been captured, and Cassini is probably the most populous one, the ones that we've gotten the most data back, to the point if you've ever seen that beautiful image, and there's actually a moving version of it, a video of it, that shows the entire sphere of Jupiter laid out in a flat panel. That was captured by Cassini as it was passing by. So Pioneer was one. Pioneer 11 was one that passed by. You're probably thinking of or may remember Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. But then the Galileo probe, most recently, was the one that went passing by Jupiter. And the reason why we've had so many spacecraft pass Jupiter, it's an interesting planet, and we can talk about why it is so interesting and why we study it so heavily. But again, it's that gravity assist. We love to pass things by Jupiter because it has such that huge gravity well that allows us to kind of slide down the bottom of that well, gather speed, and then rocket out the other side. And it's free energy. It's energy that you don't have to take in the form of rocket fuel.
So it's a couple of thousand times. How much bigger than Earth in terms of volume, Tony?
Oh, let me get the right answer for you there.
But
I want to speak out of school.
Even though it's way bigger, it's less dense than Earth, right?
It is, but it's just got so much stuff. It's got so much mass there. So Jupiter is 2.5 times more massive than the rest of the planets combined. So it's about 11 times larger than Earth in terms of diameter. But you're absolutely right. Those are cloud tops there. That's all weather systems going on down deep, and that's one of the really big things, the really interesting things that we want to study as we start these science orbits around Jupiter.
So how long will it be in orbit, Tony?
So it's going to be about 2 years, close to 2 years. And normally there's a plan that's put together called the primary mission, and it's the minimal amount of things that we want to achieve scientifically. It's the minimum number of questions that we want to get answered, data that we want to collect. But it's pretty well understood that most spacecraft, when that primary mission is complete, that there's a good chance, NASA willing, Congress willing, and money willing, that you can extend that mission. Because you've already paid for the spacecraft, it's already there doing what it needs to do. So it's a matter of funding some scientists for another period of years or whatever to continue the studies and continue data gathering. That's not the case with Juno. Juno is a one and done mission. It has a very specific number of It's about 20 months that it's going to be in operation, and the reason for that is Jupiter's going to fry this spacecraft. It's not going to be possible to continue this mission beyond its initial planning, and we really built a tank when we built Juno. We built a very protected box that all of the scientific instruments are inside, and it's a very thick titanium box that has all of the computing equipment and the communications and most of the scientific equipment. Some of it's on the exterior for obvious reasons, to be able to do the measurements they need to do. But the way one of the project scientists described it to me was picture putting your laptop in the microwave for a couple of days. And that's what this poor spacecraft is going to receive over its lifetime. So that about 20 months and then it's done.
But Tony, did I read that actually the radiation around Jupiter is a lot less than what they thought a long time ago when they first started talking about missions up there? So they found out that it actually was going to be possible to get a rocket there because the radiation was less, so they needed less shielding than what they originally thought?
Yeah, and previous technologies wouldn't have been sufficient to put that shielding in place. So you're right that is what made it possible. Still, there's a lot of radiation there, to the point where I'm fortunate enough to judge the North Carolina State Science Fair, and over the past couple of years, I've seen this project twice, and it's been done differently enough between two different very creative high school students. The one that sticks out in my mind is the one that took his mother's clothesline. This was out in the middle of North Carolina. Those are the kind of science projects I love, when somebody takes what they have available to them and has some burning question, and they go figure out how to answer that question with the materials they have available to them. So he took his mother's clothesline and turned it into a radio receiver. Took a Heathkit style radio receiver. I didn't even know you could find those anymore. But he tuned it into the frequencies that Jupiter is spitting out on a regular basis, and Jupiter is really, really noisy, and it's all that radiation that's being created in the magnetosphere.
So all these geomagnetic storms and everything that are there, do they get auroras, Tony?
They do. Yeah, they get auroras. So that's one of the main science objectives of the equipment on board, on the instruments on board that are there to measure that magnetosphere. They're also going to measure the impact of, or the effects of, the aurora, and there's cameras on board that will also get hopefully some pretty good images of the aurora. So that's something we have to look forward to.
But Tony, the planet is not solid like our planet is, right? I mean, it's all gas and liquid and plasma, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. There's no surface that we could land on, but just due to the mass of the planet, maybe 100 miles down is where we expect, if you were to put a spacecraft in, and we will, that's the end of mission plan, which is actually pretty spectacular. It's going to, just the simple pressure, the atmospheric pressure and the gravity is going to rip that spacecraft apart.
So is that how the spacecraft will meet its demise?
That is end of mission. That's the end of mission plan, is deorbit into the planet itself, into Jupiter. And I asked the question of one of the mission scientists, are you going to try and leave those instruments running during that deorbit? And the answer was absolutely yes. We're going to point that communications array back at Earth, and we're going to record all the way down and transmit the whole way down and get what we can get.
So you'll be able to hear some screaming at that point, I bet.
Yeah. Yeah, so and I think James gave me a penalty box a couple of weeks ago when I shared some of that screaming we've already gotten as we entered the heliopause. I'm sorry, the magnetopause.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That's right. So at the end of Galileo, it had a planned demise too, and it was there to protect potential life on the moons, right, Tom?
And that is the same story here, and that is the reason that it's being deorbited into the planet, is that there's just too much other interesting stuff around there on the moons, particularly it's a spot where if life were to be found in the solar system, those are amongst the most likely places. So the last thing we want to do is, well, number one, a man-made spacecraft. We want to be very careful before we even visit a spot like that, so that we don't taint any evidence we might find. But especially a horribly irradiated one, we don't want to be crashing that into those moons.
Well, I love the headline that I saw about that on one of the websites. It said on one of the news websites, it says that Galileo was destroyed to protect aliens.
Hey, if it fits.
So you think somewhere down there in the primordial stew of Jupiter there might be some life somewhere in
probably not Jupiter, but perhaps somewhere like
one of the moons.
Yeah, Europa is a really good candidate for something like that. And as new missions are proposed by NASA and by other space agencies, you see Europa come up a lot as a place that we'd like to go and test some of those theories.
So Tony, this is a really big planet, obviously, but it rotates very quickly. And one day's spin is, what did I read, 9.5 hours?
Sounds about right.
So what sort of issues or situations does that create in terms of the science of the planet?
Well, that's probably where a lot of that magnetosphere is coming from. A lot of that activity and that really horrible place to operate a spacecraft is coming from, is that quick rotation period. But it created a bit of a challenge for the mission planners because the goal here is to map the entire planet. And the way you do that, regardless of the planet, Jupiter, Earth, or whatever, is you go into a polar orbit. So all of our Earth-observing satellites here are launched not from the Kennedy Space Center, because if we were to try to launch from there, it would overfly my home, and I'm not too cool with that. So we launch these things from California, where we can launch directly south and get into that polar orbit. We're doing that same kind of thing on Jupiter. We're launching into a polar orbit, but it's a very, very weird orbit, and I'll share an image with it before we hang up here. But it's a very elongated, highly elliptical orbit, but it is a polar orbit, so we're taking glancing blows as we get close to the planet and measuring those cloud tops and getting great images there. But because of that fast rotation rate, it took some creativity, and that's one of the reasons that it's so highly elongated, is to be able to completely cover the planet in that fast rotation. The other reason is to give the spacecraft a rest. Get it out of that microwave oven, if you will, for a little while and let it rest.
So Tony, talk about the Great Red Spot. That's a fascinating phenomenon. And why is it shrinking? Is it a global warming thing? You're seeing Stan's listening over there.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that. Thank you. The answer is we don't know. There's been a lot of observations of that. It's probably one of the most observed planetary features ever. There's been sketches made of it forever, so we have some good data on how big it used to be, but you're absolutely right, it is changing in size, and we don't know why. So that's one of the big questions that I hope is answered by this mission.
So the moons are really fascinating to me, Tony, and I'm sure they are to astronomers and scientists like you. Talk about them for a second.
So the moons of Jupiter are, they're where astronomy was born, if you want to think of it in that terms, and they really changed our view of our solar system and our place in the solar system simply by watching them orbit around the planet. They're a favorite thing of mine to look at with my backyard telescope, and my local astronomy club, I go and volunteer with them from time to time and bring my telescope out. One thing that we put together, I love it when I show somebody the moons of Jupiter for the first time, and look, they're able to look at it with their own eyes. That's something that's hard to beat. The only competitor is maybe the rings of Saturn. People really enjoy seeing that for the first time. But we would get some really interesting questions from people when they would look at the at the moons. They would notice that there's different sizes. You can even make out some different colors if you look closely enough. But often, even the really young kids would ask us, what are the names of those moons? And they'd want to know the stories behind why they were named what they were naming. So we finally put together, myself and some of the folks in the astronomy club, put together a Twitter account. And let me bring it up here. And one second. So it is a Twitter account that periodically, it's about every 4 hours, and that's sufficient for the speed of these moons, goes out there and tweets an ASCII version of the map of the moons around Jupiter and tells you what they are in what position. And we did this as a cheat for ourselves when we're out there with the telescope, so we'd be able to tell folks what the names of these moons were. And there's even some tools out there that let you predict when that great red spot is going to come around too, because there's a couple of folks that bring out telescopes that are big enough to see that red spot.
So Tony, you were going to talk to us about the solar panels, and we don't want to let you get away without talking about that because that sounds fascinating.
Oh yeah, so that's one of the really neat things about this mission is that there's a lot of firsts that are associated with it, and the solar panels make up quite a number of those firsts. So let me get up my notes here. This is the first time we've sent a mission out this far with solar panels. So let me get to that list here. Yeah, it's the first mission to operate solar panels all the way out to Jupiter, and this speaks to the technology advancements. 10 years ago, there's no way we could have done this. The solar panels, the solar cells that make up those panels just weren't advanced enough. They weren't efficient enough. But one of the really neat things that happened, these solar panels are the size of a school bus, and there's 3 of them. And when you put this whole spacecraft together, it would fill up an entire basketball court. So there's thousands and thousands of these little solar cells that are on these solar panels. And the neat thing is, when they were delivered to the contractor that was putting the spacecraft together, they expected a failure rate of around 5%. That's acceptable in this kind of environment. And the failure rate was 0. So every one of those solar cells worked perfectly, and it really helped them get in under budget, they say. But so it's the farthest solar power spacecraft from Earth ever. It's the only time we've ever orbited an outer planet pole to pole. We talked about that polar orbit. And another kind of cool thing is this is the first time we've ever had a 3D printed part on board a spacecraft before. So this kind of speaks to the technological advancements that made a lot of this possible and brought some of that cost down a little bit.
Hey Tony, I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. I was looking at researching. Well, I googled your name, and something that popped up was really interesting. Don't get scared. But
boy, this show could go right down
ArrestRecords.com.
Is this involving my career as a flat-picking bluegrass musician?
You just
Google
never
brains.
know. No, what it popped up is this solar system ambassador program. The Weather Service started this Weather Ready Nation Ambassador program. The solar
Rick,
system ambassador.
you do realize you're never going to get him to stop talking about this, right?
Hey, I'm fascinated because that's pretty cool, and I see it does predate the Weather Service's version of this quite a few years. Talk about that program a little bit. It looks interesting.
It does, and it actually goes back to one of those missions that we were talking about earlier, and that's the Galileo program. So it started out as the Galileo ambassadors, and when the Galileo mission finished, it moved on to they learned that there was value beyond that one mission, and it moved on to the solar system, if you will. So it's a group of several hundred people around the country. I think there's 6 or 8 of us in the Raleigh area now. Some areas have lots of representation, some have less representation. But it's a program that's been very, very successful for NASA. It's run by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. There's 1.5 employees that support it, so it's a big bang for your tax dollar buck. But we are lay people. We are volunteering our time, but we go into schools, we go into museums and things like that, and just try to get people aware of the missions, aware of space exploration, and we'll talk to anybody that'll listen to us. Obviously, I talk Nate's ear off about this sort of thing. It's actually how I came to be known to Nate.
In a very good way, by the way. I kid, but I think it's a really fascinating program, and I think as I look at what, and maybe Rick, this is what you were getting to, or not, but I'll say it. This is where I think the Weather Ready Nation Ambassador Program needs to be. That's, to me, this program. You've got some operational support. There's training. There's, Tony, tell Rick about the reports you file. I mean, this isn't just you say you're going to do something, but there's actually some accountability to this.
Absolutely. When you apply to be a part of this program, I've had government jobs that have not been as well vetted as entry into this program. So you put in an application, you give a list of references. They contact every one of those references. You have to commit to a certain number of events or activities per year. You are supplying contact information about your local media, about your local school systems and planetaria and museum. They want to make sure that you're legit, that you're going to go out there and put the time in and really do this the right way. So to answer your original question, what's very different about this program, I think, as I understand it, than the Weather Ready Nation is the Solar System Ambassador Program is really focused on individuals that are out there, kind of boots on the ground, if you will, getting the message out there. As I understand Weather Ready Nation, it's maybe a little more institutional, a little more focused on maybe universities or schools or that sort of thing, and not so much about providing, to Nate's point, training to further the knowledge and get the word out there.
Well, there's definitely some differences there, but I kind of agree with Nate. I mean, there's elements of this solar system ambassador program that could be easily transferred into the Weather Ready Nation thing, because some blend of those two would be cool. Because this, it's just so fascinating going and talking to people about this. It must be a rewarding volunteer job to go and talk about something to people that a lot of people are really interested in. I mean, besides weather, I think there's a ton of people out there that are fascinated by astronomy and everything in the sky. So must be a rewarding job.
Absolutely, and Nate and I have had this conversation many times. We share two sciences here, if you will, that are really gateway sciences. Not everybody that you talk to is going to turn out to be a broadcast meteorologist or somebody working for the Weather Service or something like that. Not everybody I talk to certainly is going to be an astronaut, but that's okay. These are two sciences that people are really interested in, and it leads particularly kids into STEM fields and things like that. It leads to them getting interested in other sciences or maths or whatever that they might not be able to or otherwise.
So, Tony, coming up this week, we've got the Perseids. What kind of a show are we going to expect?
Wow, should be a good one. Everything is pointing to this one being one of the best ever. And the reason why actually involves our friend Jupiter. So the normal average, if you will, of a Perseid meteor shower, the ZHR, the zenith hourly rate, which is the measurement of how many meteors you'll see on average in an hour from zenith, which is directly overhead, the least amount of atmosphere you're looking through, from a very dark site. The normal average is about 100. So we're seeing some predictions upwards of 200, and I've seen some even higher than that. Those are a bit of outliers, though, but I think we're pretty confident that we're going to see something pretty cool here this year. And the reason why is kind of fun, too. This is the comet that creates this, that is responsible for this meteor shower, is Swift-Tuttle, and it's a 133-year comet, meaning every 133 years it comes through our neighborhood. Every time it comes through, it leaves a little bit of dust behind. It leaves a dust trail behind. And its orbit is slightly different every time it comes through. So as we look through the past several times that it's made its way through, and we calculate the movement of that trail. It doesn't just stay there. There's all sorts of gravitational forces that are going on in our solar system, primarily from our friend Jupiter. It's so massive that it can tug and pull on that dust trail. Sometimes those dust trails merge together, and they get into just the right spot as Earth passes through that trail that we can get an outburst. We can get a higher rate of meteors coming through, and that's what's anticipated for this year.
So Tony, which are the best nights this week, and give us some viewing tips.
So the 11th into the 12th, and if you've read the various reports that have come out, and I know there's a lot of really good websites out there that give some ideas on this and give reports on when are the best time to go and look at these meteors. The 11th into the 12th is the time to look. The Meteoroid Office down in Huntsville, NASA's Meteoroid Office, is advising between 3 a.m. and dawn. So that's kind of your typical advice when it comes to looking for meteors. And the reason for that is your position on Earth is rotating into the meteor stream at that point. So it's kind of like thinking about when you're driving in a snowstorm. You're going to see more meteors coming at you with the front windshield than the back windshield. So that's the idea here. So 3 a.m. to dawn is the ideal time. But the cool thing about this particular meteor shower, is all of the models are pointing to the absolute peak time to look for meteors at about a little bit before sunset Eastern time. So what that means is pretty much across the country, any time between sunset and sunrise should be a good time to go out and look at them. We're going to see lots and lots of meteors that period between sunset and midnight. So you don't have to wake the kids up at 3 o'clock in the morning to see something pretty cool.
Hey, Tony, it's odd to me how people, we'll say this on television or put it out on social media, and they'll say, well, I went out there for 5 minutes and I didn't see anything. Hey, man, it's not a fireworks show. There's, we live in a drive-through society where people want it, and they want it now, and they're expecting some, wham-bam 5-minute fireworks show and it's over. You have to have a little patience here, right?
Yeah, this isn't a YouTube video. You can't just tune it in and get your show and move on with it. You're going to need at least 20 minutes before your eyes have even adjusted to the dark. And these things are not super bright. The darker the location you can get to, of course, is the thing to do. But not everybody can hop in the car and drive out to the boonies. So the best advice is give yourself time. You're absolutely right there. 20 minutes minimum. Make yourself a cup of coffee, some hot cocoa. Go out there and enjoy the evening. Lean back in your lawn chair, take a blanket out there, and make an evening of it. So give yourself a good 20 minutes. If you've got one of those barn lights on your neighbor's house that you can't convince them to turn off, don't look in that direction. Look opposite of that direction. Yes, this is the Perseid meteor shower, so they're going to appear to be emanating from the constellation Perseus, which is going to be in the north. But you don't have to look there, especially if that barn light is over in the north. Look in the dark part of the sky. So take your time, lay out, enjoy the evening, listen to the wildlife around you, and look to that dark part of the sky and lay out there for an hour.
And drink that hot chocolate with that 77-degree dew point. It'll be very refreshing.
So Tony, how bad is the light pollution in trying to see it?
It is extremely bad. If you're looking from a downtown location, you're probably not going to see a whole lot. You're probably going to see in the neighborhood of 10 meteors. You're going to see the really bright ones, and they're going to vary in brightness based on the size of the material that's coming through the atmosphere. Keep in mind that these are little grains of sand,
right?
And they're coming in at 130,000 miles an hour, and that's what creates all this brightness. The way to think of the material that's coming in, it's about the size and even density of grape nuts. Think of grape nut cereal. So that's what you're trying to see. The darker the place you can get to, the more you're going to see. It's a matter of how many you see.
Okay. But I just was thinking, like, you would see some in a downtown location, but the further you can get out away from downtown and get away from that light pollution, the better your chances are going to be then.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's matter of how many you'll see in a given period of time.
Tony, a couple of weeks ago, we realized the International Space Station was going to come over at a very high, very high path across the sky, and it was fascinating. So talk about that for a minute. How easy that is to do. How can people know when the space station is around, and what height above the Earth's surface is it traveling?
So it's going about 250 miles above the Earth's surface, and the thing to know when you see that thing going over, it's surprising the first time you see it. You expect it to be a plane, but nothing's blinking. So it looks like a very fast-moving star. The ISS is particularly easy to see, being so large. It's about the size of a football field. It's very reflective as well. So that's it's easy to pick it out the first time you try. When it's going directly over, and that's rare when it goes up to that zenith, up to 90 degrees over top of you. Even easier to see, but you're also going to see it for a very long period of time. There's a number of web apps, there's a number of apps you can get for your cell phone that will predict when that's going to go over. And it's plus or minus about 2 hours before sunrise or after sunset. Because what you're actually seeing is the sun illuminating the station up here 250 miles off of the Earth while you're in darkness. So it really stands out in the sky. But there's a number of, and I'll tweet some out after we hang up here, but there's a number of places you can go and find when it's going to be coming over your station. NASA has a couple. Heavens Above is a pretty good one.
I had a moment I guess it was last year. My mom and I were whole family was at the beach, and Mom and I ducked out to go run an errand, and we stopped and got some ice cream on the way back because it's vacation and calories don't count on vacation. And I had checked Twitter and had seen that we were looking for an ISS pass later that evening, and it happened to be about the time that we were standing in line at this roadside ice cream stand at about 9 o'clock in the middle of the summer. And of course, there's a bunch of people there, and my mom was born in the 50s. She lived through the Cold War and saw Sputnik and all this other stuff. So it was really cool for me to point that out to her and to say, that's what that was, and you could see it, going. It was a fairly high pass. It probably was up there 5.5 or 6 minutes. It seemed like forever. And I'm pointing this out, and other people are like, well, what are you looking at? And I pointed up and I said, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was one of the times where we were in the middle of a crew exchange, and so there were 6 people on all at the same time. And so I pointed up and I'm like, there's 6 people on that as it goes overhead. And just as we kept talking about it, more people just started to gather around. There's a cool factor to this that is undeniable. Yes. And it's a way to connect with people, whether you're just out and about. Kids, if you can show them a model of it or a picture of it, and talk about what people are doing, the fact that there are people on it, and then point up and then tell them how far away it is and everything. It's really cool.
And you looked like a genius when you did it too, I bet.
Well, I always look like a genius to my mom, but that's because she's my mom and I'm her firstborn. But yeah, it's certainly a cool moment to be able to point that out, and people are like, wow, how'd you know that? I'm like, well, I know things.
I'm on the tweeter.
Yeah, that's right.
I got to share my coolest ISS spotting story. It actually belongs to my wife. So I had the family down at the Kennedy Space Center. This was years ago. We were about to watch the launch of STS-131, I think it was. It was a morning launch, beautiful morning launch. It was about an hour and a half before sunrise, so the sun was just coming up the right angle, and the plume of the shuttle rising was really, really pretty, and it produced some really cool colors in the atmosphere. But the shuttle was going to the ISS. That was the purpose of those last couple of shuttle flights. And in order for the shuttle to reach the ISS, it had to launch into the plane of the ISS's path. So about 4 or 5 minutes before launch time, the ISS passes over. Well, we're right before sunrise here, so nice, big, and bright. Here goes the ISS. And my wife looks at me and she says, aren't you going to say something? What? I totally missed it. She spotted it in a field of, there must have been 2,000 of our best friends at the Astronaut Hall of Fame in Titusville, Florida, right there off of the Banana River. And she points it out and says in her loudest voice, "There goes the ISS," and this field of 2,000 people go silent and are pointing, watching it with their fingers, pointing along. So that's her claim to fame, is she spotted the ISS before anybody else.
So Tony, the movie Gravity or the movie The Martian, which did you like better?
Oh, The Martian by far.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, tell us what you liked about it. I love that movie too. But what were your favorite parts?
The math. The author did such a wonderful job figuring out all the orbital parameters. Sent the crew to Mars at the right time. Even calculated when he was going to send them, so that and I don't think this is any spoiler at this point, so the crew would be there over Thanksgiving, so you could get the potatoes there, because that was such a big part of the story. So just about every scientific piece that you could come up with there was really, really well done, with the exception of that opening scene with that storm. That storm is just absolutely not possible on Mars because of that really, really thin atmosphere. There's just not enough atmosphere. There's not enough stuff in the atmosphere to pick up all that dust and move it. You know, there are dust storms on Mars, and we have had periods where the entire surface of Mars is not visible because there will be a planet-wide dust storm. But even then, it's like a gentle breeze, just based on that low atmosphere. So they did a really good job with the rest of the movie, particularly the math. A lot of suspension of disbelief there at the end when they're trying to get him off the surface and back up with his crewmates, but that's okay. You get one or two bad pieces of science in science fiction as long as you do a good job with the rest.
So Tony, I'm sorry.
That's why they call it science fiction.
Yeah.
So Tony, you'll be at the National Weather Association Weather Ready Fest on September 10th in Norfolk. Talk about what you're going to be talking about.
So we'll be talking about planetary atmospheres. We'll be talking about planetary weather. It's WeatherFest, so let's talk about some weather on some other planets. So hopefully by then we'll have a few more images off of Juno. We can talk a little bit more about those weather patterns and those huge storms, those planet-wide storms that we see on Jupiter. We'll talk about the atmosphere of Venus, of course, and what has been studied by the various missions that have gone there. And we'll talk about the atmosphere or lack thereof of planets like Mercury and our own moon.
That's going to be fascinating. We thank you for being a part of that, Tony. And you'll be speaking to the broadcasters on Sunday, I understand. So talk about what you'll be talking about then.
So we're going to be talking about the use of astronomy in outreach and how meteorologists can make that, particularly broadcast meteorologists, can make that a part of their day-to-day outreach activities and just get people interested in science in general and how astronomy can help there.
Since people think we are already people who study meteors, you might as well have back it up. And truthfully, though, I've had Tony's spoken to my broadcast meteorologist class at NC State a number of times, and it's always one of the most well-received guest lectures of the whole semester, something the students enjoy. And I see them using it and then commenting later about the sort of the cool factor about some of that that they get when they actually use it and interact with people in the public. So next time I teach, not this fall, Tony, but next time, block out your calendar.
I enjoy it. Get to talk to those station scientists of tomorrow.
Hey, Tony, I got a favor, big favor.
All right,
ready?
Let's hear what it is.
So there are 7 remaining men alive that walked on the moon. I want you to get one of those guys on this show.
Wow, that's a tall order. I've met 2 of them.
Well, see, there you go. You're best friends with these guys.
I didn't say best friends. I said met. Yeah, we're losing them at a fast rate, so we better get on that.
So you got Buzz Aldrin, and he's very active on social media. I mean, I really see more of his stuff, oddly enough, on Google Plus, but it's really good. He's not
afraid to pick a fight either, which is fantastic.
He's certainly surly. Yeah.
And Alan Bean, David Scott, John Young, Charles Duke, and Gene Cernan, Harrison Schmidt. And
I thought all these guys that you were going to make Tony name all of them. Which he
No,
probably could
He
have
probably
done.
could have.
I know he can. I can. I got a cheat sheet here, but all these guys are 80 or older now. The oldest is Young at 80. I'm sorry, Aldrin at 86, and Young at 85. And I'm just saying, I would love to, because you know my story. I'm one of the older guys here. I was born in 1956, and was 13 years old when man walked on the moon for the first time. And it was those young guys were heroes. Or how about let's see, let's go in a different direction. Maybe one of the mission control guys, the mission controllers like Gene Kranz. What about him?
Mm-hmm.
Let's go with Christopher Kraft.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There you
Come
go.
on.
He's a good Virginia Tech alumni, and they actually named Mission Control for him just a couple of years ago. And he's still
You know, I like John Aaron. You know, Aaron. Which was the mission where Lightning hit the Saturn V as it was taken off?
Apollo 8.
8. You know, everything went blank and nobody knew what to do. And John Aaron, who was a flight controller,
Steely-eyed missile man.
Yes.
yeah, I mean this guy fooled around and was curious and had played with some of these switches, and he made the greatest call in NASA history. Takes the SCE to aux, signal condition electronics to auxiliary, a little bitty switch, and these guys had no idea what it was or what it did, but it was like behind one of their shoulders. They hit that switch and everything came back up. And boy, what a great success that was. Otherwise, they would have to abort, and aborting is just a horribly dangerous thing.
So Tony, talk about that for a second. You know, the astronauts, Elle found a cool article about, how being in space affected the astronauts' hearts, but obviously a lot of them have been around for, longer than normal longevity. How does that play into an astronaut's life?
Well, one of the big things that they're finding now is that it's affecting their eyesight. I think the longevity, I don't think we can attribute spaceflight as lengthening their lives. I think they're probably a little bit better shape than certainly I am.
Right.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we really have to wrap our heads around and have to understand before we have any chance of sending anybody to Mars. So there's been, of course, a number of studies that have gone on. That's one of the ongoing experiments that's going on the International Space Station. And if you think back to the year-long mission that just completed on the International Space Station, where we had two twins. One was on station, one was on the ground. And that's the closest thing we have to human cloning, if you want to think about it in those terms. So those same experiments that were going on station on one side of the twins were going on the ground around the same time. So that gave us a good understanding of how long-term spaceflight, and that's the longest we've had, is around a year. Long-term spaceflight was affecting people.
James, I'll ask one more thing. I know I'd passed it to you, but I want to apologize because I think this is so fascinating. But I just finished the book about the Wright brothers by David McCullough, and I thought it was fascinating that Neil Armstrong carried a swatch of the original Wright Flyer with him to the moon, and had it in his pocket when he walked on the moon. And that's a spoiler alert for the end of the book.
And you can see that swatch at the Wright Brothers Memorial in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. It's hanging on the wall.
By the way, we were corrected. Mike Estwick over on Twitter, he reminded us that the SCE to aux call was not Apollo 8, but Apollo 12.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Something else bad happened with 8, and I'm trying to remember what it was.
But yeah, gosh, those guys in mission control. And Tony, how primitive was their computing power in the 60s compared to what we have today?
Well, you want to see some pictures? Because I was actually in mission control about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So
rub it in, why don't you?
Yeah. So that's one of the really nice things about being a solar system ambassador is you get to rub elbows with some NASA folks from time to time. I have now been in every active mission control outside the European Space Agency, and I got a trip coming up to Germany here in a couple of weeks, so maybe I can pull that off. But I got to stand in the mission control that was used during the Apollo 11 program, and some of the things that you notice when you look at those consoles. Well, a number of the consoles are very, very deep. and that's because this was all tube TVs back then. And they had to communicate with one another. They had the consoles, which probably, or I'm sorry, the headsets, which all probably smelled horribly of cigarette smoke. But when they wanted to communicate from console to console, there was a dial telephone on the console there. So that's something I bet kids look at today and don't even understand what it is. It's something that caught my eye that I'd never noticed. Yeah, exactly. That I'd never noticed before, looking at pictures of this in books and such, until I actually got the chance to walk around this room, was, you know, those tubes that you put your hard-earned check in at the bank and go to deposit? That's how they also communicated, and they also stored or sent paperwork and stuff off to the archive. There was a place where you could stick whatever it is you need to stick in this tube and send it off to the teller in the back room. Primitive technologies.
But it worked.
So let me see if I can find some of those pictures while we're talking about this. But yeah, I got the chance to walk around there, and I notice mundane things when I get these opportunities. This was on a layover at the Houston airport. I called up a friend of mine who is a flight controller on the International Space Station. His team's responsibility is making sure that the solar panels on the station are working optimally and providing them the power they need. Let me go ahead and share this. But this room was also used during the shuttle program. So what you're looking at here is pretty much the last set of documentation from the last time the shuttle program used this room. Just left there, left in place. So that really fascinated me. But these are what some of these, get to some of the consoles. There's the red phone from the couple of DoD missions. But you mentioned that older technology. Yeah, this is what it looked like. And these were pulled out of retirement. They were in a storage facility at the Johnson Space Center in Houston and put back in here after the shuttle program. And it's part of the tour that you can go through when you visit Space Center Houston.
I wanted to go back to Apollo 1. A lot of people my age, they know what happened, but there was a horrible fire and 3 astronauts were killed. And I thought Kranz and his talk to the other controllers, the flight controllers, was just one of the greatest speeches in history. And for those watching, I've got it up on the screen, but the end of it, he told those controllers, from this day forward, flight control will be known by 2 words, tough and competent. Tough means we are forever accountable for what we do or what we fail to do. We will never again compromise our responsibilities. Every time we walk into mission control, we will know what we stand for. Competent means we will never take anything for granted. We will never be found short in our knowledge or in our skills. Mission control will be perfect. When you leave this meeting today, you'll go to your office, and the first thing you will do there is to write tough and competent on your blackboards. It will never be erased. Each day when you enter the room, these words will remind you of the price paid by Grissom, White, and Chaffee. These words are the price of admission to the ranks of mission control. This guy was just awesome. Apollo 1, I don't think, Tony, people really understand how that changed things and the magnitude of that crisis.
Yeah, simply losing the crew. That's the first time they had lost an entire crew. So that really changed things. And I just threw up an image that I took inside of the White Room, the White Mission Control, where the International Space Station is currently controlled from. And these are the mission patches from those missions where they've lost crew. This is looking over those controllers 24/7. This is the first thing that they see when they come in. It's the last thing they see when they leave, and it's always looking over them. So that's definitely not been forgotten, those words that you mentioned.
Yeah, it's awesome stuff. We got to take a break because I've checked the clock here. It's been a great discussion, but we're not through. We got a lot to go here. We're going to come back after. And by the way, your astronomy report has been the last hour, so there.
Yeah, I didn't submit one today. I figured you'd had enough of me.
Yeah. You know, with an hour of Tony, it doesn't get any better. But we've got Professor Peters. We'll come back with the weather roundup. We'll have the picks of the week and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
Last week on our pre-recorded WeatherBrains, I used the 101 segment to bring everyone up to date on the status of lightning deaths in the United States. Unfortunately, there have been at least 2 more fatalities in the U.S., bringing the current total to 22. Both of the latest deaths occurred at the beach, one in Florida and one in North Carolina. So keeping on the lightning theme, here's a couple of myths. You may have heard this one. Rubber tires on a car protect you from lightning by insulating you from the ground. Or better yet, your rubber sneakers keep you insulated from the ground. The fact is that most cars are safe from lightning, but it is not the rubber tires nor the rubber sneakers. The metal roof and the metal sides are what protect you. When lightning strikes a vehicle, the electrical charge flows along the metal skin of the vehicle and through the metal frame into the ground. Remember, any open vehicles like convertibles, motorcycles, bicycles, open-shelled outdoor recreational vehicles, and cars with fiberglass shells offer no protection from lightning. For regular metal vehicles, don't lean on doors or hold on to metal items like gear shifts or door handles during a thunderstorm. Now here's another myth, and I bet you've heard this one too. If it's not raining or there aren't clouds overhead, you're safe from lightning. This myth was probably started by people trying to play a ball game. In fact, lightning often strikes more than 6 miles from the center of the thunderstorm, far outside the rain or thunderstorm cloud. Bolts from the blue, as they are sometimes called, can strike 10 to 15 miles from the thunderstorm coming out of the anvil portion of that thunderstorm. Now, the bottom line here is that lightning is dangerous. It is my understanding that the 5-year-old boy that was killed at the beach in North Carolina last week was struck by lightning as he and his family were taking steps to seek shelter. So when you hear thunder, make it a race to get to the proper shelter before you're struck. If you have a question about the weather, you can drop an email to question@weatherbrains.com.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
We are doing the show on August 8th, 2016, and let's start with our East Coast correspondents, Nate and Tony. What's the weather doing over there?
We had a stalled out frontal boundary that didn't stall out as long as we thought it would. It started to drift northward today and caused some heavy rain in portions of North Carolina, some scattered showers and thunderstorms, and probably more of the same tomorrow. And then after that, it looks like the Bermuda High tries to reassert itself a little bit and may help to bump our temperatures back into the 90s here in North Carolina and across portions of the South. Meanwhile, just a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous upper low spinning across Georgia today that made just some very pretty visible satellite imagery. And at one point, the combination of the warm front lifting northward across the state, the clouds hanging tough on the north side of the front but really clearing out south, just made for a really pretty picture with that upper level low spinning across Georgia. I'll confess to sort of losing myself and staring at it for a couple of minutes.
That means you're a true weather weenie.
And it was amazing too with that upper high centered over Alabama with the mid-level low. It almost looked like an inland tropical storm was trying to form with the evacuation of the exhaust and the circulation down low. It was really cool.
All right, Rick, what's happening out west, Oklahoma?
The heat continues. We've had temperatures up near 100 or over 100. I think Kevin may have melted down there in Wichita Falls. I think they've been over 100 for several days now. And fortunately, we do see a pattern change coming where we're going to have this ridge kind of break down a little bit. And we've actually got, just looking at our forecast, we've got 50, 60 pops in the forecast late this weekend with temperatures in the 80s. So nobody's going to complain about that for sure.
Yeah, down here in the deep south, we kind of have that going on now. We have highs in the 80s this week with fairly active storms every day with the upper feature nearby. So that's a good thing. And while we were kind of in between doing the live shows here, we had a little tropical system blow up down there. What was this thing called? Earl?
I think the subject of a Dixie Chicks song, and we've officially said goodbye to Earl and hello to Javier.
Yeah, crossed over.
That's right. It crossed over, and we had a nice crossover, and it's now formed back into a tropical storm. Doesn't happen very often, and every now and again you get some really interesting things where it'll the name in theory would be of one gender, so to speak, and then it would cross over and get another one on the other side. But in any event, it's cool when it happens.
And I think some of that moisture is going to feed up into the southwest, will it not?
Probably will.
Yeah. So our friends in the monsoon season there in Phoenix and Arizona and New Mexico, they could see some enhanced rain in coming days from that. What's going on in the tropics, Nate? You're the closest to the Atlantic.
Looks like we're going to be quiet. There was a little disturbance north of the Caribbean a couple of days ago that has since really started to not look very good. It looks like we'll probably be quiet for the next week or so, at least as far as the Gulf Coast and the East Coast are concerned. It looked like for a while there that the Africa was coming alive, but it seems to have quieted down just a little bit. So see how things play out over the next couple of weeks. We're about a month away from peak hurricane season here on the 8th of August, so about 33 days before we hit the climatological peak. So it's still a little early, but we expect things to start picking up.
And there's still great concern. It's been so long
Yeah.
for this country to experience a hurricane. It's been so long for those of us in the professional ranks to really have to at least – now the Hurricane Center, they've been busy. They deal with hurricanes anywhere in the Atlantic Basin. But for those of us that forecast for these that are approaching the United States, we haven't done that in 10 years. And Brian, you hadn't covered what was the last hurricane you covered out in the field?
Oh, gosh. Holy mackerel. It's been a while.
Katrina?
Was it Katrina?
Yeah, I think that probably was.
And it just seemed like Brian was down there almost every week on the coast for a year or two, and then all of a sudden it just goes quiet for 10 years, and it happens. But we were talking about that driving from Starkville today. We just haven't done it in so long. It's almost like we need to do a drill. And now it's going to be different. When everybody goes down there now, they're going to have not their satellite trucks, but the little live views, these little, cellular live packs. And the problem is when you've got, 10,000 blow-dried boobs down there trying to use their live views at the same time, you got a problem. And then with a landfalling hurricane, that's a problem anyway. So I think we might not want to put the satellite trucks out in the graveyard just yet, and that you will probably need those. So, but yeah, we'll see if the hurricane season can come alive. By the way, Nate, Tony has alleged that you've been carving ice. Is that true?
We carved a little bit of ice last week.
Explain this for people that don't understand.
So a year ago, we decided that we would make an ice sculpture, an ice desk, and just sort of see how long it took to melt. And
thought I was kidding.
No, we did the ice desk in the wintertime, and then we did an ice sculpture last summer, one of the hotter stretches, and we had people guess how long it would take to melt. And I'm not at all ashamed to tell you that I won that contest, nailing it to within about 15 minutes of a melt that took the better part of 2 days.
That was way off.
So we did it again this year because this is the first time that we've had the Olympics on our air, at least in the last 30 years. Our station went from being a CBS affiliate to an NBC affiliate, and so we are really trying to sell the Olympics and use that as a way to get to drive interest, which they don't really need a lot of help to drive interest to the Olympics, but we wanted to make sure that folks knew that we had them this year. And that's Tony was showing you a picture of the ice test that we had about a year and a half ago. That was pretty cool. We had to cover it during the daytime because the sunlight helped to melt it, but it lasted the better part of a week. And the funny story about that, we were gonna after one of the later newscasts, we were gonna just quietly go out and take a couple of hammers to it and just bash it to bits so that it would finish melting. And that got out, and people on social media were like, no, don't destroy the ice desk. So we had to let it melt a couple of extra days before we did that because people were very they were very upset about that. They'd grown attached to the ice desk.
Well, you gave it its own Twitter account, so people had really grown attached.
That's right. And then we had the sand desk with Orville and Wilbur as two pelicans on either side of this desk that we did that. And that's the one time, I hope I still have a picture somewhere, but the one time that I got to do weather on live television wearing a Hawaiian shirt. It was the pinnacle of my career.
Tony, what is this thing we're looking at?
So this is the most recent one. The one that lasted, maybe 24 hours if you're lucky, Nate?
No, this one actually lasted longer than the one before because it wasn't as hot. We had more clouds, and so we debuted that on Thursday morning last week, and it was still hanging tough when the opening ceremony started Friday night at 7:30.
Wow.
So, and then there's the Sandesk. He's pulling that up. We had a contest for folks. We used this thing for like a month. It was insane. So Tony, you'll have to talk so that it comes up. But the two pelicans on either side, we had a contest for people to name them, and they named them Orville and Wilbur because
Not Santos and Dumont.
Yes, I've been embroiled in a bit of a Twitter controversy about who invented or who did flight first. Apparently, the Brazilians think that their guy did it, and he was a pioneer to be sure, but the Wrights did it first.
Exactly.
All right. So before we do picks of the week, let me chase a rat hole here. So these NBC stations getting these mobile
Boom, boom, boom.
these mobile radars, the Doppler on wheels.
And I'm not getting one, and I'm kind of sad about that. We're the newest.
You're not an NBC O&O, are you?
No, but we're one of the newest affiliates. We're going to be one of the best when it's all said and done. They should have. They should have helped us out, but we'll just have to do it on our own.
So the Capital Weather Gang, I think Jason wrote this. Is it a gimmick, or is this something that's actually useful?
So my thought on this is it's absolutely a promotional tool. When you talk about and I had a conversation with one of the other meteorologists in the Dallas market about this, not at the NBC station, and he said, give me a network of spotters and pictures of a tornado or something, and I'll take that every time as a meteorologist. And I think there's something to be said for that. It makes really good TV to actually have pictures of what's going on out there. But I got to tell you, mobile radar truck, Storm, what was it, Storm Commander or whatever?
Storm Ranger.
Storm Ranger, yeah. That's going to be a heck of a promotional campaign. It's something you can drive around on quiet weather days. And my thought on this is this. If you have somebody competent telling it where to go and interpreting the data, it can be really, really cool. And I think that you look at a Josh Werman or a Howie Bluestein and the kinds of things that they can see with a radar up close, plus the opportunity for that radar to fill gaps in the NexRad network or to compensate for radars that are down or to be able to follow a storm, that has a lot of value. But the problem is to maximize that value, which we in the broadcast industry are not exactly known for when it comes to high-tech science equipment like this. To maximize that value, you really need somebody who knows what they're doing and who can really be dedicated to operating the truck or to directing the truck to where it needs to go. And I'm skeptical as to see whether that will be done consistently. But I certainly hope they do it because I think it would be really cool. Now, one of the other things that's been brought up is whether or not, especially for the one that's in Dallas, if it goes north or if they're interacting with research projects, whether there will be sufficient coordination between that crew and any research trucks that may be out in order to not step on each other's radar frequencies to avoid interference and that sort of thing. I think that's a very small concern, but it's legitimate because you could have, you think of that truck or any truck causing interference at the same time you have the El Reno tornado and the data set that we would have lost with that. It's from a research standpoint, it would be tragic, but I think they've got a right to have it. It's if they've got the license to operate the radar. I just hope that they'll dedicate the talent, the scientific talent to it, in order to maximize its value. You take somebody like a John McLaughlin from KCCI in Des Moines, guy who knows radar forward and backward and knows how to apply it in a broadcast setting. You put him in the wheel of that truck, I'd take that every day of the week. And I hope that the Dallas Mets are going to be up. David Finfrock and Rick Mitchell in their shop, they do a really nice job. Hopefully their management will support them in such a way that they can make best use of that truck, and likewise for the rest of the NBC stations that are getting them. Otherwise, when those go up for sale in a year and a half because they've moved on, can send it down my way because I know what I'll do with it.
Nate, I saw that Rick and David have been tweeting.
You say what now?
I was going to say I saw David and Rick at Channel 5 in Dallas have been tweeting. They've got their truck and they're taking it on the Grand Tour. Come to Frisco and see it Saturday and get your picture taken with it. So a couple of quick things. There was a lot of comments after this came out, and I think Howie and Josh are quoted in the Angela Fritz Washington Post article, because she called me and wanted me to quote, and I didn't say anything for it, but I'll say it now. There was a comment about there about how difficult it can be to set up a radar for mobile operations like this, to find the right spot and the right angle. Another thing to consider is, as far as I know, this type of radar data has never been used live operationally for real time. We don't get real time mobile radar information in a forecast office to make warning decisions. So I know it takes weeks and months for researchers to unfold the data and do their magic to it before they're able to get a lot of really solid, detailed information out of it. So I think there may be some value there, but it's not like just a miniature version of the radar you see on TV and popping that out there on a hill somewhere. It's going to be, there's a lot more involved in it, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see what the stations do with it.
There's potential. I just hope that they maximize it and don't allow it to just reduce to being solely a gimmick.
Right.
And here's one of the ironic things I see in it. So I've seen over and over, it's been stated by these major market stations that this will help them detect severe weather in rural areas. So here's my question. When have these guys ever gone on television wall to wall for a rural area? They're the stations that don't. You know, I mean, if it's in the city, yeah, fine. If it's in the metro, they'll be on the air and they'll be doing all this stuff. The minute it gets out into some county where there's 2 meters and they go back to Freak of the Week or whatever's on television, they don't cover rural areas. They don't. So I can't wait to see if they take that truck out 80 miles away from their major city and they see something, and if they go wall to wall, and if they do, I will be impressed and amen and hallelujah and great. But I have a funny feeling it's just going to be the same old thing. They're not going to go on television with it. So, and it goes back to my point that I say over and over, people that live in rural areas are discriminated against. And their life is just as precious as if your life's in the city. Doesn't matter. And the TV stations say, well, we might get some nasty email for cutting off Grey's Anatomy. Well, so what? You can't run your business based on fear of getting a nasty email. You're going to get a nasty email no matter what you do. So how about running your business based on what's right? And that's going on television and doing coverage for rural areas. I don't understand that. It drives me nuts. So I will be watching these guys to see if they take it 80 miles away and they got that mobile truck and they got that X-band radar looking in a storm, and let's see if they go on television with it. That's my challenge. If you got the truck and if you're 80 miles out and you see something, put it on television and don't do a stinking crawl. So there.
Well, I think you should say that they consistently go on TV, because they'll definitely go on TV the first, when it's new. The key will be, does it continue, I think.
Yeah, and again, for some stations, if it's west or southwest of the big city, the metro, they'll go on television with it because it's approaching the metro. But the minute it goes north and east of the metro, they're going to reporters. If there's a touchdown, they'll go to news and they'll take over and they'll show damage and everything, basically ignoring a life-threatening storm that's in the northeast part of their DMA moving away from the city. It doesn't work here. You ask people in the news department, look, I'm the quarterback here, and if there's a life-threatening storm, you just got to sit and wait for a minute. I'll get you on when I can, but you're not going to go on television. We're going to stay on the air until we get this stuff out of the way. And I don't understand that philosophy. I understand managers, there's only 2 meters, ratings don't, it's no big deal.
Well, and here's the funny thing.
We are not serving meters, we are serving people.
But here's the funny thing about the whole meter thing. When you start talking about metered markets, when you have a certain fraction of the meters go offline because the power's out, the ratings are tossed. Done. April 16th, 2011, here in this market, we won Emmys for that coverage, but we have no idea what the ratings were because there were too many meters that had lost power. The sample size, which is already fairly small, big enough to be useful, but fairly small, they lost enough of those meters that they lost integrity of the sample, and so we have no idea what those numbers look like. Management, I think, could take a sneak peek, but we can't use them. We can't, talk about them, that sort of thing. And so when you start talking about serving meters and meter strategies, that falls flat, because at that point the ratings aren't going to be available anyway.
Yeah, look, on our big day 5 years ago, we had no idea what the ratings were because power was out to like 300,000 people. We don't know. And quite frankly, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, everybody did what they were supposed to do. But again, that my challenge to all these television stations is to take care of people that live in rural areas. That's my simple challenge. The Weather Service does, and the emergency managers do, but yet broadcasters don't, because they're afraid they're going to cut off Freak of the Week or women that name their butt cheeks or whatever's on TV and make somebody mad. And I interrupted a program.
By the way.
Yeah, I interrupted a program. That was the topic of the show, women who name their butt cheeks. It was the Ricky Lake show. I'm thinking, who in their right mind is watching this? But you know, we've got to do better at that. But we got to move on here to Picks of the Week. It is time now for that magical segment. Brian, what'd you do? Your hamster quit running in the wheel or what?
Oh, yes. You know how it is. You can't keep those hamsters happy.
All right. Well,
I didn't bring him back enough barbecue from Little Dewey's.
Hey, there you go.
While we have you, what happens to be your pick of the week this week, Brian?
I'm trying to remember what I picked.
It was so good.
It was so good. Actually, it was. Somebody, I think it's your pick, James, has to do with tropical cyclones.
Yeah, my pick. Don't steal mine.
No. Yours is safe. From that, though, I linked to CIRA, which is a cooperative with NOAA on that page that you picked. And CIRA has got some very interesting things. If you're really a weather nerd, it's got some really interesting things on that page, so I'm going to make CIRA my and that's a cooperative institute for the research of the atmosphere.
Right. And in my pick, it's their tropical section, which offers some really good detailed information for invests and tropical cyclones. And I was aware of that page, but I just haven't gone there for a while. And it's just a treasure trove. So as we approach the core of the hurricane season, you might find that useful. All right, Tony, what do you have for us, sir?
I'm going to go with missionjuno.swi.edu. So this is the Juno mission pages that are put together by the team that's responsible for the mission. And there's all sorts of great stuff about the mission there. Lots of video and lots of interviews with the mission scientists. And I challenge anybody who was interested in what we had to talk about today, who's also interested in Lego, to go visit that page and find out about the little Lego minifigures that are on board Juno right now.
Cool. Good-looking picture, too. All right, Rick Smith, what's your pick of the week?
I have a pick and a half. My official pick is this I went week, so I got to make Michael Lowry, hurricane specialist at the Weather Channel, did a blog post back on July 29th called Evacuate or Stay. It's about some of the hurricane evacuation plans and how rusty some of those are getting. It's been a while since we've had to use them in a lot of areas, so it's a really good read on that. And my half pick is just to note that the GOES 14 Imager has started back up, and they're going to be back in super rapid scan operations for GOES-R imagery starting tomorrow, August 9th, and they'll be going through August 25th. This means 1-minute updates over select areas of the country. The coverage area will depend on the expected weather, and maybe, Brian, we can put this link up on the show notes and have people go there. But there's a website where you can go and see this 1-minute imagery. Nate talked about being hypnotized by satellite today. You can really get hypnotized by the 1-minute imagery.
I can't wait for GOES-R, and we get that 1-minute data over a much, it's going to be great.
All the time, everywhere.
Mesmerizing. Yeah, that's awesome.
Rick, can you put it in the notes on the side?
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
Thank you.
All right, Nate, what you got for us?
A site that Tony actually pointed me to, and I thought it was appropriate for this evening's conversation about astronomy. It's Clear Dark Sky, and it's a site where they do forecasts for specific locations with an eye toward astronomy. And I pick it for two reasons. Number one, I think it's appropriate. But number two, I think it represents something that we as meteorologists, especially on the operational side, need to think more about, and that is forecasting for a specific audience. They've gone in, they've identified a niche of people who have a specific need. They need to have clarity in the atmosphere. And that's not just clouds, it's humidity, it's dust, it's things like that that contribute to how clear and how clearly you can see through the atmosphere. And then they've tuned their algorithm to try and identify days that are good versus bad. And I think that that's something that those of us who communicate weather forecasts need to be thinking much more about than we do.
Awesome. And again, all these links will be up on weatherbrains.com. Bill Murray, what do you have for us this week?
Dr. Span, I would like the foghorn so that it can make sure that it doesn't get rusty. We have to keep it in good shape in operating. My show next week, some show notes coming up in the next few weeks, will be very NWA-centric with all the players that are involved, and the annual meeting will have Mike Vesio, the program chair, Dave Freeman, Janice Bunting, Trevor Boucher, Tricia Palmer will all join us in waves next week. We'll be talking about the NWA meeting. The following week we'll have FedEx's Jeremy Scott Smith and Greg Duden talking about aviation weather. That's going to be a blast. We're going to have the anniversary of Katrina on the 29th, and John Zarella, very famous name from covering hurricanes, will be with us that night. Nick Walker from the Weather Channel will be on the Tuesday after Labor Day, and then we'll be live from the NWA Broadcasters Dinner on Monday, September 12th. And so we'll surely have some surprises during that. And then Phil Klotzbach is going to join us on the 26th, and Matt Parker, the new president of the AMS, will join us on October 17th. That's some of the guests coming up here in future weeks, James.
Awesome, and we all regret the passing of Dave Schwartz of the Weather Channel. One of the really good guys.
That hit me like a punch in the gut. I don't know about anybody else, but I was really sad to hear that.
Yeah, and again, Brian, if you can put the show where he came on with us, he was on WeatherBrains.
It's on there.
Okay, I just thought that was a really fun show, and he loved life, and he was a great inspiration, and we certainly were so sad to hear of his passing. But I have got to go because, I'm probably the lead because it might rain some tomorrow. Because we are tracking some rain tracking south. Hey, Tony Rice, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, plug your accounts and your websites. Go.
So I'm RTP Hokie, Hokie, on Twitter. You can also follow, more specifically, Mars WX Report if you want to see what the temperatures and pressures are like on Mars from day to day.
Awesome. And our accounts are on the website, weatherbrains.com. The email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. Aubrey will be back sooner or later, and she'll get to all the email, but we see all of them. So we thank you for watching at live.bigbrainsmedia.com, or most of you listening. So we got to run here on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew. I am James Spann. Thanks a lot for listening. Have a marvelous week, and God bless.
Thanks so much, Tony.
Thank you very much.
Great show. Loved it, Tony. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.